Good morning, Doug.
Happy New Year.
It's a beautiful day. It's I think the day before the first kind of snow we get in central Indiana. What do you think?
I hope so. I love snow. I mean, if it's going to be cold, it might as well snow. That's what I think.
You know, every January in the January anchor, I put like a list of to-dos, and one of those in the last 5 years was to pummel somebody with a snowball, like randomly, somebody you don't know.
I wouldn't do it to somebody I don't know. But maybe
I did.
I mean, we have where Gimbal Financial World headquarters is. If you haven't been here, stop by. But it is on a main thoroughfare in Carmel, and we have a brick sidewalk. How cool is that? With all kinds of walkers and dogs who pass by. So maybe, Keith,
Maybe I could
you
get
could
somebody.
go to one of our neighbors' porches and throw a snowball from one of our neighbors' porches.
I did a
at
hook shot over the car is how I did it while I was
Okay.
driving. Some guy was getting in his car. Hook shot, gave him the left-handed hook shot. My kids were horrified at the process, but
So check this out, friends. This happens to Keith and I regularly, only often. We found out that we're both going to the Green Bay Packers game this weekend. How crazy is that?
yeah, like that made me smile when I got word of that. I was like, how funny. We did something else. Weren't we going to Kentucky this
Yeah.
year and we decided to ride along since we were
Yeah.
going to the exact same place?
Yeah. And so the office will be in good hands on oh no, you'll be back on Monday.
Yeah, we'll be back. Kelly's got to work, so that was my Christmas present from number two, Kelly. She she put out to the social media that she wanted to start being a football fan and allowed her social media fans to dictate who she became a fan of. And as of this weekend, she'll have been to her second Green Bay Packers game since probably September, which is
I love that.
crazy.
Yeah. So all of you who are considering becoming a baseball fan, maybe that's what you throw out there this winter is which team should I follow in the summertime?
Wonder why people follow certain teams. I went to the game where the Colts went to the Super Bowl. They were getting beat by New England and at the half, just getting smacked. And then they came back and won it at the end. And I was way up in the nosebleed section. And I was sitting there wondering, I'm like, what a marketing miracle that you could take all these unrelated people and get a city behind them to pay ridiculous amounts of money to come watch these games.
Oh yeah.
I understand why you go to a Carmel football game, right? Because it's the community, it's your kids and things. But to go to a Pacers or a Colts game, they have nothing. There's no relationship to you whatsoever, and to build that franchise like professional sports has done has been pretty amazing.
I think my dad's story with the Yankees is pretty cool. He grew up watching the Yankees. They became his favorite team. And the only reason he grew up liking the Yankees is they were the only team on TV. So New York media was able to broadcast Yankees games. They were in their backyard. And so you have Yankees Nation. You got a lot of Yankees fans who live all over the country just because of broadcasting.
I was the youngest of the grandkids on my mom's side of the family and kind of felt like the outcast because all the older ones got all the activity with grandma and grandpa. And then one day grandpa invited me to a St. Louis Cardinals doubleheader, which I don't even know they do double headers anymore, but that's an all-day affair. He had us probably 10th row or below. We're right by the bullpen, so I'm watching the pitchers warm up, and we didn't have interstates back then. I know that's that's this old book is pre-interstate, so
wow, people's minds are blown.
Yeah, so we drove these old roads and
had your Coca-Cola metal cooler.
And grandpa probably did because he owned a grocery, and we were not getting snacks at the game. I hate bologna and hated it then, and bologna with mustard is not as bad as it could get, and that's what I on the roadside stop. That's what my snack was. But I was just thrilled to be the grandpa, and to this day I'm a St. Louis Cardinals fan. Yeah, it's the reason I like the Cardinals. Shout out to all our Cardinals fans out there. Well, Doug, what do you think about the market starting
It's funny. Like I said, the market's have opened up the new year down, and it's not down a whole lot, is what I think. And so, Keith and I, we look at the markets several minutes a day. We're fascinated by them. We can't help ourselves. Don't do that, by the way. But we do it. And, I was following it this week, and I was just looking at some notes to see, well, how far off is the S&P 500? How far off is the NASDAQ? And it's really meaningless. I mean,
When you say far off of the high that we hit in December?
no, like just to start the year, not even the high in December, just starting off the year. Because
Okay.
when I tune into Bloomberg Radio on my ways into work, or I don't ever watch what's the show with Maria.
I don't watch any of it. Yeah.
Yeah, we don't watch that stuff. But the entertainment shows, the stock entertainment shows, I'm sure they're like, oh, January, it's down. As the start of the new year goes, the whole year will go. And it's this just hype of like gloom and doom. And I was just looking to see, okay, well, how bad is it? It's really not that bad. We had a fantastic run up that started late October, early November. Tech stocks sponsored it. And I think what we're seeing right now, which I'm just super excited about, is a broadening of the markets. And by broadening, I mean, we might start to see some stocks that haven't been in the limelight start to do well. And we might see some smaller stocks, some foreign stocks, maybe. I don't know. But the market will tell us. What will the market do this year? It will tell us. We don't need to get ahead of it. We just need to keep watching it and reacting to it. So I'm pleased with the action right now. If you, like we talked about last week on the show, stock indexes are made up of stocks. And so the Dow Jones 30 stocks, S&P 500, 500 stocks. And on the S&P 500, there's like the top 10 make up 30% of the S&P 500. And so if one of those, like Apple this week, it's been rough. If Apple gets hit, the S&P gets hit. And so you have to pay attention to the stocks that make up the indices.
Boy, the short term can really distract you from what's going on in the market, and the longer you stretch it out, the more you can kind of say, okay, what do we have going on here? So like this is a picture of the market going back to 1997, and one of the things we've said on the show a number of times, Doug, is if you threw a picture of a chart down on the ground and you looked at it, what would you take away from it? What would be your thoughts?
Yeah.
Is this an upward trending market or a downward trending? And so when we look at the long term here, you can see it's basically a slow, gradual trend upward to the right. And the thing that I think we add value for you all are these events right here. This, and this was really bad, but it doesn't reflect as significant of a downturn. If you look at the underbelly of this bear market right here, there were many stocks that just got hit by 80 or 90%. Their value just dropped through the floor. But probably in my career, I would say this market right here was the most difficult one. You basically lost a decade of value. And if you happen to retire here in 2000-ish, it was tough sailing for you. And so to add in the possibility that we might move your investments to the sidelines because of exorbitant risk, should help flatten out this curve for you, that you don't have maybe as many dips going down the road. We can't guarantee we can do that, but I think that sure makes sense. But that's the long-term view. But if we flip this over to what's going on short-term, there's really nothing going on short-term. When I look at that, I don't see anything significant that's really changed since a month ago.
Yeah, I'm okay with this. I mean, the volume has picked up a little bit, but this happens, and it's the first of the year. Investors are thinking about their tax considerations. They're thinking about risk exposure. They're having conversations with their advisors, and so yeah, we'll just keep marching on. What I'm really curious about, Keith, and we don't talk about it a whole lot, but I'm really curious what will happen with bonds this year. And we've talked about it on the show a little bit that money market rates are very short term. They're invested in short term investment vehicles, and they've been yielding pretty strong rates on the short term. The longer term stuff really fell off in that October to December timeframe. And so I think it'll be interesting to see how bonds settle. And where that affects most investors is most investors have some type of bond exposure in their mutual funds. And if we look at bond exposure and bond risk, what I would like to see is I would like to see a couple rate pauses or maybe a rate cut, and then see how bonds react. But right now, a lot of speculators have tried to get in front of that, and I think they've been hurt.
Well, interest rates have been on nearly a 40-year decline, where they've been dropping for nearly 40 years. And then we just saw, with the actions of our federal government, the Federal Reserve, we brought inflation back into the equation, or they did. And consequently, then the cost of money begins to go up and that's what interest rates reflect, is what's the cost of using my money? Well, in an inflationary time, you're gonna have to pay me more money to have my money than in a deflationary time. And so the question probably with bonds is inflation over. And,
Right.
And historically, the government has punted on that. They've just historically screwed that up whenever they've tried to bring inflation to an end. So we'll see what happens.
There's going to be a lot of stories this year, obviously election stuff, but I think the interest rates are going to be a big one for us.
Yeah, and that's probably worth you all looking at on your ordinary accounts, whether it's your checking or savings accounts, and seeing what you're actually being paid, because a number of financial institutions haven't even stepped up to the plate and rewarded you as a loyal depositor for your savings account. Like if you're still getting less than 1% on your savings account, you probably ought to stop by your bank or financial institution and ask them what's going on. And because there's plenty of FDIC insured accounts that you can get much higher than 1% on your money. And that may not seem like a big deal, but if you have a lot of money sitting in cash, it may be the difference in, paying some expense on a monthly basis that you have on your cash flow by getting a little higher interest rate.
Yeah, it could be worth the cost.
Yeah. I literally made that change a few years ago, where I drove across town from one financial institution to another. And I think the difference between 2022's tax return and 2023's tax return is I'm going to have to pay taxes on interest for the first time in maybe a decade. Yeah, which is all right. Yeah. That's a good situation. Well, what else? Anything else we need to talk about on the market itself, Doug?
I don't think so. I think just staying power right now is important.
Yeah, and probably to, if you've got investments that we aren't watching for you and you want us to take a look at those, it's probably worth bringing those to the equation so we can review those for you and see if there's any changes that might make sense going into the new year.
I'd love to give you an analysis on it, an opinion, and we can run it through the opinion of stock charts.
Yeah,
that's how we review it with you.
Yeah, and there are, well, William O'Neill, we've mentioned his name a bunch. He said all stocks are speculative, and no matter what stocks you have, they always have the potential to go to zero. So, and that seems really elementary to us, but I think if you get caught with a stock that's made you some money over time, and maybe it's a local brand name, or it's something that your parents or grandparents owned, it may be hard to appreciate that. But
and maybe even something that you could see easier is it could go down 20% and then go down 20% and then go down 20% and then go down 20%.
It can do that to infinity. You can reduce any number by 20% for infinity, and it's just a math thing, but
it's just a math thing.
It's what can happen. But I think that the most famous example, or one of the most famous examples in the last 20 years, is General Motors. It is a publicly traded company today, but the stock, the publicly traded stock 20 years ago went to zero and is out of business. And so all those people that had General Motors stock, they lost all their value. And so we're not saying that that's what's going to happen to anything you own. It's just we're saying you need to pay attention to what's going on, and we're happy to help you with that. Well, you didn't mention our disclaimer today, Doug. I put the
Yeah.
that you wanted the buffet up there, so the buffet said, "Please don't nibble on the buffet." But
Nice.
the buffet is
Whole Foods is my favorite lunch spot. Okay, if you want to go out to lunch, I'll meet you at Whole Foods. And Keith and I went there the other day, and on the buffet it says no nibbling. That was the disclaimer, and so we just loved that sign.
well, and I think I'm a risk taker. And
In certain areas.
yes, and risk is defined as an unexpected outcome. And for me, a risky behavior that I don't even like doing, but I do from time to time, and this is going to sound bougie, I did on my Christmas vacation on a cruise, and that was eating on a buffet. I just think that is as risky as my life gets.
Yes, that's pretty risky.
Yeah, and shout out to Royal Caribbean that they took the ice cream machine away from the consumers and put an employee back there to hand you your ice cream, because that was the nastiest.
A lot of kids.
A lot of kids with their face up in the ice cream machine. But thinking about risk was one of the topics I did during my Christmas vacation. And for a lot of reasons, but I read this book, Gambler, by a fellow by the name of Billy Walters. And it says Secrets from a Life at Risk was the book. And there's a number of reasons that I was motivated to read the book, but one of which is, and we've mentioned this on the show before, is the inability of media or anybody else to use adult discretion, I think, to help people. And I think the carbon monoxide effect of gambling on our culture is probably something that's going to be significant in the months and years ahead, whether it's FanDuel or who's one of the DraftKings, where they're just hammering these young folks with this free $20 bet this weekend, because the goal is to get them like a hook like a fish. And I've personally witnessed the addictive possibilities of gambling and how detrimental it can be to people's lives. And so when I heard of this fellow, Billy Walters, he actually was a successful gambler, made hundreds of millions of dollars in gambling. And so I wanted to hear his story. And part of it is, if you've gone on a cruise, probably 8 to 10% of their profits are designed by their casino.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because you're offshore.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
And
yeah.
so the cruise is designed to make you feel like you're in a spectacular place, like you're in a once in a lifetime kind of place. But I don't know if you all have ever gone into a casino. It does not feel that way. Like most casinos that I've ever walked through smell like an ashtray. Nothing against smoking. I'm just saying I'm not a smoker. And so it's one of the places on the planet you can still smoke, besides Italy. And so it is a subset of a cruise ship that doesn't make you feel like you're in a wonderful place.
Interesting.
Yeah, if you ever have the opportunity to go into a casino and just walk around and look, it's going to smell like cigarettes. If you look at the faces of the people gambling, it's going to be a dejected, depressed look on their face. And so that part of the cruise ship is the opposite of the whole thing that they're trying to put off. But the profits that go along with it, they're willing to set aside that much square footage on the cruise ship for the profits associated with it. So it's kind of it's a funny thing if you're walking around observing it.
I've never been on a cruise. I would never have thought of that.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that there was gambling on a cruise boat.
Yeah. And so it's part of the economics, but the same way that part of the cultural economics today, I don't, because I'm a math junkie on things like that I don't think people pay attention to the math of it. And so
I'm picturing you reading this gambling book with your dark sunglasses on, near the casino. Is that what you were doing?
I was actually I was listening to it like this. That's what I was looking at.
Confessions. Confessions.
And most likely 2 times normal speed. So it would annoy most of you to no end. But I was intrigued by it. That if we've got any listeners today that are from the Evansville area, that's where my roots are in Evansville. I mean, I love Evansville. It's a seedy place, though. I mean, river towns had gambling back in the, in the riverboats days, and a lot of that remnant is down there. So there's a lot of gambling history down in Evansville. So the gambling idea has always kind of struck my mind. But if you study gambling, you're probably in the United States history, you're going to ultimately find your way back at the mafia. So it's not designed as a profitable way of life, or it's not the best habit that you can take up. But I was just looking, the state offered gambling the lottery, and so I just pulled up a bunch of their scratch offs because they're a really bad situation. They're a bad deal, but they had one called Wild Cherry Crossword 5X is the name of it. Is $5 ticket to win $100,000. And so the odds of winning in any way are 1 in 3.71 tickets.
Okay.
So if you buy 4 tickets, you're going to win one. And so mathematically, that seems like, well, that's not a bad deal. But then if you see for that particular game, they're going to have $14,670,000 of revenues come in for that game, for that one scratch off in the state of Indiana. And there's, if you look on the website, there's a bunch of them. It says on the rules, though, they're going to pay out 9.9 million of that, 67% of it.
Oh my goodness.
Okay.
Yeah, and that all goes towards schools.
Right. Right. And of the $100,000 prize that they suggested there, they're going to give away, I guess 3 of them is what they're giving away, $300,000.
Okay.
So we're starting with 14 million, and they're giving away 300,000 of the prize.
What a chip.
Yeah. So if you're walking through the grocery and you got your $5 bill and you're like, oh, I could win, you could. The odds of that happening are 1 in 978,000. So mathematically, when I was in school, they basically said the lottery is for the mathematically illiterate. So that's just the lottery. And then when I was looking into what Billy Walters, he's kind of an interesting guy. What he was saying is only 2% of the people that bet sports bets ever make money.
Wow.
And so there's a 98% chance you're not going to make money. And so I was just comparing that with risks in life, like people are afraid of airplanes. There's probably a 99.99999% chance you're going to arrive safely.
Yep.
So it's a pretty safe risk.
Yeah.
But people fear, that's one of the highest fears they have. But to think that there's a 98% chance you're going to lose your money, probably don't want to do sports gambling.
Yeah.
And what intrigued me with him when I was reading his book is he gave away his secrets, which is what I love about the investment business. Is the great investors will tell you exactly how they did it.
Absolutely.
And he didn't do this early on because he didn't want anybody stealing, because it's supply and demand on the odds. And so when I was reading what he said here in chapters 21 and 22 of his book, he says he mentions MGM, DraftKings, FanDuel, Caesars. These are places where they're sending emails out to these young people to bet $5 or $20. But he says none of which of these I can assure you exist to help you win.
Right.
And then he says, and winning isn't easy. The odds are stacked against you from the start. And so the next few chapters, he goes through and explains, if you want to make money in gambling, how to do it, like in sports gambling. And what intrigued me was the details that he went to in here to be a successful to be one of the 2%. Some of the examples of how he makes a bet is he knows that for being a home and visitor on the same turf, you add 1 point to the bet.
Okay,
So like with whatever the point spread is, so that he's looking at the turf quality, he's looking at which division you're in, which conference you're in, he looks at your schedule, he goes through this whole laundry list and he narrows it down to a bet based on what the market is putting out as the spread or what the bet has to do. He narrows it down to ones that he thinks he has a higher bet and he'll put in more money into that bet, or one that he thinks that's too close to call, he won't put any money into it. And in all of that, he says he would never bet more than 1 to 3% of the amount that he was willing to bet. And so what do you think about that?
well, think the odds are stacked against you. And so I just quickly think of the stock market because people say that's like gambling.
Yes.
And, historically, the stock market is in your favor. It
Right.
moves in the right direction. I can't imagine all the emotions involved and the creativity and work that goes into placing bets in a system that's stacked against you.
Well, the difference between the stock market, which I don't believe is gambling, and gambling is a zero sum game.
Yeah,
Which when I say a zero sum game, it means that if I don't, yeah. So here's a $20 bill that if I'm going to bet my $20 bill, either I'm going to win your $20 bill or you're going to win mine.
that's right.
And so that $20 is disappearing. But in the stock market, if you put $20 in the market, if we both put $20 in there, we can both make money.
That's right.
Yeah. So somebody doesn't have to lose for you to make money. In gambling, somebody's got to lose their money. And most likely it's going to be the average person who doesn't take the time that Billy Walters did, because they don't build the buildings in Atlantic City or in Las Vegas to lose money. Royal Caribbean doesn't put the casino in there because it's just a fun thing for you to do. It's a profit center for them, and that's what it's in there for. And I think the reason I was hyped to talk about this at the beginning of the year is that in one of our last times we were together, I had talked to a banker who said that in credit card charges, which they monitor what the top 10 expenses are people spend money on a monthly basis, is gambling through those things finally hit the top 10.
Oh, that's wild.
It's a little scary, I think, that
Yeah.
to think that somebody, when they're thinking of all, I mean, credit card debt's hitting an all-time high right now. People are probably feeling more pinches. And to think that gambling is going to rescue from that is probably not the case. And most of the time, the people that are going to lose money from gambling are those that don't understand the math that's working against them. And
But how
don't.
easy is it for kids who are doing like, what are the NFL, like, what's those?
Fantasy games.
Fantasy games.
Yeah.
To transition into, hey, let's keep it interesting.
Well, I don't, I've dominated today talking about gambling, but I got immersed in it in a pretty hardcore way in the late 80s. My best friend at the time lost his career, his wife, his house, everything from sports gambling, and slept on my sofa for probably 6 months. And so back in the late 80s, I did a deep dive into gambling and learned about the addictive nature of it. It's not like alcohol or other addictions that it doesn't come with a smell, and it creates a lot of devious behavior for the shame and guilt that the person feels from losing.
Yeah.
They hide these things, and so it's a dangerous behavior that it's not designed for you to have success, and it's detrimental to families. It's probably why I'm so aggressively opposed to it as somebody who looks at risk every day.
I'd just say, hey, if you're in that, or if you know somebody's in it, we'll hang out with them.
Yeah, no, I am intimately familiar with the idea, and I'm an advocate of living life to the fullest. And so, like, even something I don't believe in, I spent the time just to go through the book to understand the idea even more. And
It's good.
And it's worthy, as a financial advisor, it's worthy for us to point this out to people, because the marketing forces are coming at people so aggressively. We've got the national championship in football coming up and the Super Bowl coming up within 30 days. And I think you're going to see a lot more advertising for these in the days ahead.
And those sports are promoting it. I think MLB, if you look up FanDuel or any of those, I can't remember the other one, but the MLB was an early investor in one of those.
Right. And I wrote for one of our future
Pete
anchors.
Rose, poor Pete Rose.
Well, that's what I just wrote an article yesterday for one of our future newsletters, and I just was writing about the hypocrisy that Pete Rose is out of the game, and
Yeah.
now that they're embracing it, and really they know that if they didn't think it was a bad thing, they wouldn't have kicked him out of baseball, right?
Right.
And so it just becomes a profit thing. So anyway, I didn't mean to harp too long on that idea. I was just mesmerized by Billy Walters. Like, it's a good read if you don't mind getting into seedy details of the gambling world, because he's in the midst of it, and he throws some professional golfers under the bus. So it's a good read. Sorry to dominate as much today.
Hey, all good. We'll look forward to seeing everybody next week.
We'll hope for a Green Bay Packer win too.
And Colts.
Yes, go Colts. See ya.